Alright, here's the situation. There's a massive nationwide network outage today in Australia, and I am unfortunately affected. It's like when you wake up, you can't connect to the internet, and you can't even use your mobile data, and you can't even make a phone call, and they haven't fixed it yet. I've never felt this disconnected and isolated from the rest of the world. So that's why I'm just filming this wrap up now, and hopefully it gets fixed soon. I know you can't tell, but this top is actually from Zara's girls collection, and it's for children from 9 to 10, and I'm more than twice that age. The first book I read last month was Sisters in Yellow by Kawakami Mieko, and as you can see, this entire cover is in yellow, and this is the dust jacket. This is the latest novel by Kawakami, and you probably know her from her other novels like Heaven and Breast and Eggs, and she is also the author who once criticized Murakami for his problematic portrayal of female characters in his books. I love her because she is so outspoken, especially if you look into the issue of gender inequality in the Japanese society. You'll see what I mean. The majority of the characters from her books are women from the lower class or girls who grew up without knowing their fathers or whose fathers left them at some point. She brings to life their financial struggles, their indifference to sex, and their determination to establish their own means by themselves. Her portrayal of these female characters is just so raw, especially in this book, that I feel like I'm watching a documentary or something. I just adore her. I know this is irrelevant and probably a bit impolite, but here's a photo of the author, and guess how old she is? Do you know what? She is 47. Like, if you told me she is 27, I would believe you. I just need to know her skincare routine and her daily routine, what she eats, and I need to stop. The Japanese title of the book literally means the yellow house, and personally I prefer the English title. And it's about a poor, innocent and socially awkward 17-year-old girl who only wants to, earn enough money in the last 3 years of high school so that she can be independent and live on her own. But something has happened and she becomes enslaved by the pursuit of money and walks down the path of crime. It was so shocking and thrilling to read the downward spiral of the main character as she is driven to take extreme measures. Her intention is to escape poverty and to live a better life than her mom, but the measures she takes keep her at the bottom of the society. But I have to ask myself, does she know a better way, or I should say, the proper way to earn money? No, because her upbringing is so impoverished and she doesn't know the importance of education, and that's why she drops out of high school, and in the end she is left with no other choice. So embedded in this story is this issue of class stratification or class rigidity. Just when she is on the brink of a better life, someone from her family or her family side drags her back down. This kind of helplessness reminds me of The Grapes of Wrath, and upon finishing this book, I just could do nothing but lament and cry. It's so heartbreaking when you see an ending that tells you how cruel and unforgiving reality is. Oh, and the first chapter of the book is a flashback to the pandemic we just experienced, which, kind of makes the story closer to us. And the English translation of the book should come out in 2025 if I'm not mistaken, so please add this book to your TBR. And I will talk about this book again when the translation comes out, hopefully. Dear Charlotte, why give me hope just to break my heart again on the very last page? This book draws upon Charlotte's experience of unrequited love during her time teaching in Brussels, so it's a sad book to say the best. And these days I've been thinking about the sorrows buried in the line. Monsieur Emmanuel was away 3 years. Reader, they were the 3 happiest years of my life. It's from the last chapter, and to me it stands out as the most heartbreaking line in this 600-page story of martyrdom. I hope that doesn't discourage you from reading the book, because I did give it 5 stars. And George Eliot, when the book came out in 1853, exclaimed, Villette, Villette, have you read it? It's still a more wonderful book than Jane Eyre. There's something almost preternatural in its power. The story is set in the fictional town Villette in France. We follow Lucy Snow, an English woman who travels to Villette after some, unspecified family tragedy that leaves her with no home or means. In Villette, Lucy takes up a position as an English teacher at a girls' boarding school, and initially she struggles to adapt to her surroundings and with the language, but gradually she becomes more, integrated into the community. Lucy forms some complex relationships after she has settled in school, including Dr. John, who is also English and is later revealed to be her old acquaintance, and a choleric literature professor, Paul Emmanuel. One of the two central aspects of the novel is her growing affection for Dr. John. The other is her relationship with Professor Emmanuel, which is marked by misunderstandings, disagreements, and a gradual evolution of feelings. Later, the professor also becomes her confidant. I don't know how to put it, but without giving too much away, the novel takes some unexpected turns, and Lucy's fate is left somewhat ambiguous, so there's no reader I'm hurting moment, and you are left to interpret the story in your own way. The synopsis of the book that I just gave you sounds rather bland, I feel like, so I want to tell you why I like this book. First of all, this book is 600 plus pages of incredibly personal internal monologue, which reminds me of the remains of the day. Based on personal experiences, I find Charlotte's depiction of unrequited love to be the most poignant, beautiful, and relatable I have ever encountered. Secondly, Lucy is a character of remarkable humility who is obviously not someone at the center of attention, just like myself or the most of us. People say Lucy is unfeeling, hostile, and that she doesn't like her readers. I don't know where that impression comes from, perhaps because she doesn't divulge her entire past regarding her family tragedy, and she seems to be entirely alone in this world. But she is withholding information regarding her past in a way a lot of people in life are withholding. Most people you encounter in your life are entirely unknowable to you, and Lucy is just like one of them. You know something about her, but you don't know everything about her. Yes, that may make her unreliable, but in a very human way. And as I've said, Lucy is more of an observer rather than, someone who's at the center of attention. The way she describes other characters' lives, especially Dr. John's and Polly's, tells you that she sees herself as a secondary character to, these people's lives, and she is undeserving of a story of her own. And lastly, Lucy's life teaches us about independence. The book chronicles Lucy's quest to find a place and purpose for herself in a very foreign and somewhat unforgiving world. It explores the journey of a Victorian woman for whom the conventional marriage plot does not apply and how she forges her own path. Upon finishing the book, I fully understand why Jane Eyre takes precedence over Villette in the literary canon, and it took me an entire month to finish the book. So, it's great to hang out with Lucy, but Jane is a more welcoming host. And then I read The Woman in White, which I finished this month actually, and it's the third book in this wrap-up that made me cry. But it was happy tears because the characters in this book have been through too much, and to see them finally having a peaceful ending, I was just so happy for them. Just some general thoughts on the book because my internet is back and there's something I need to get to, so it's a page turner, and I was almost never bored because you know how circuitous the Victorian writing can be. And overall, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I liked, this Victorian mystery. I give it 5 stars, and it's like one of those books that just makes you want to snuggle up on a cold day near the fireplace and read. Let's pick up where we left off. Where I left off. So the story is told from multiple narrators, starting with a young art teacher called Walter Hartwright. Walter, upon the recommendation of his good-natured, funny, and a bit dramatic Italian friend, becomes the drawing master of the wealthy Laura Fairley and her half-sister Marianne Halcombe at Limerick House in Cumberland. His journey begins on a moonlit road where he meets a young woman dressed entirely in white. He helps her with the direction to London, only to be told later by the police that she actually has escaped from a lunatic asylum. So basically, he unwittingly becomes an accomplice, and that makes him a bit uneasy. Then, upon his arrival at Limerick, to his even greater astonishment, Laura looks almost identical to that woman dressed in white. With the help of Marianne, we learn that this woman in white is called Anne Catherick, and she used to live very close to Limerick and was very devoted to Laura's mum, and by extension, her daughter. Over the next 3 months, Laura and Walter fall in love, but Laura is actually engaged to a baronet called Percival Glyde. Upon realizing this, Marianne advises, Walter to leave Limerick. However, during this time, Laura receives a letter warning her against marrying Percival Glyde, and intuitively, Walter deduces that It was Anne, the woman in white, who sent this letter. A day before Walter's departure from Limerick, he meets Anne again, and their conversation not only confirms that his deduction was right, but also reveals that Percival originally placed Anne in the asylum for some underhanded reasons. So let's just pause for a moment because there are some questions to unpack here. First, why does Anne bear an uncanny resemblance to Laura? Second, why did Percival place Anne in the asylum? And third, for what reasons does Anne warn Anna against marrying Percival? It's actually not mentioned in the letter, and it's a secret that you need to find out. And because Walter leaves his position at Limerick, so he is no longer the narrator, what happens later is basically Percival and Laura get married and they spend 6 months in Italy. Upon their return, they bring back Count Fosco and his wife. The Count is Percival's friend and the Countess is Laura's aunt. Count Fosco is a man in need of money and he conspires with Percival, who is also in debt. And why do they conspire? Well, because Laura, coming from a wealthy family, has the funds they seek. So they hatch a plan to get her money, either through intimidation or by crafting a conspiracy. So this leads to further questions. What does the conspiracy entail? And is Walter gonna make a reappearance? I mean, obviously he's the main character, so you know he's gonna. But if so, how can he be of some assistance to the two sisters? I'm gonna pause here because it only gets better and better after this. And the book is split into 3 volumes. I think towards the end of the first volume and the second volume are a bit slow, but trust me, if you read it, be patient. It's going to be worth it. On to my thoughts. I don't think there's a lot of moral lessons that I can draw from this book because it's a detective story. However, I will say that given the length of this book, which is 700 pages, the author manages to craft the characters for you to root for, to despise, to detest, yet to applaud for their wickedness. Yes, that's Count Fosco that I'm talking about. And I tend to judge male authors by their portrayal of their female characters. So by this standard, I quite like Wilkie Collins because of the character Marianne Halcombe. She is remarkable. Like, she is not beautiful by conventional standards, but she is so intellectual, so brave, self-composed, and fiercely protective of her sister Laura. Obviously, if you read the book, you can see the author cares nothing about Laura, but we'll let it slip. And when you're reading her part of the story, which is her diary, you're going to see how she desires to be treated like a man. She longs to be their equal, free from the societal constraints imposed upon women. I really want to share with you some paragraphs from her diary. If I only had the privileges of a man, I would order out Sir Percival's best horse instantly and tear away on night gallop eastward to meet the rising sun. A long, hard, heavy, ceaseless gallop of hours and hours, like the famous highwayman's ride to York. Being, however, nothing but a woman, condemned to patience, propriety, and petticoats for life, I must respect the housekeeper's opinions and try to compose myself in some feeble and feminine way. And here's another one. I started to my feet as suddenly as if he had struck me. He is Percival Glyde. If I had been a man, I would have knocked him down on the threshold of his own door and have left his house, never on any earthly consideration to enter it again. But I was only a woman, and I loved his wife so dearly. And here's the last one, and Marianne's writing about the Count Fosco. He flatters my vanity by talking to me as seriously and sensibly as if I was a man. I just found her so relatable because when I was little, I wanted to be treated like a boy. Obviously, as I mentioned before, the story has a very captivating plot that unfolds seamlessly. You're also told how each character winds up towards the end. And I always prefer stories with a well-defined ending, which can help me sleep tight at night. And because the story is told from multiple characters, so you gain insight into, the personalities and idiosyncrasies of each character, and some of them are quite hilarious. So really, this book has everything that I look for in a perfect read. So that's why I like it. And because I've finished Villette and The Woman in White, I'm ready to read the next term, middle March. I will read it next year. Actually, let's not make this a flag. And then I read Hazakura to Mateki by Dazai Osamu, who's the author of No Longer Human. But because this one hasn't been translated into English yet, so I'm just going to talk about another one instead, which is Schoolgirl, again by Dazai Osamu. By the way, if you can read Japanese, please read it, and I'll link the short story somewhere because there's no copyright. so you can just read it online. By the way, I just want to show you some illustrations in these two books because they are just so stunning. By the way, this is called Hazakura from the title Hazakura to Mateki. So Hazakura means a cherry tree whose blossoms have fallen. Oh, by the way, this is the cover art. Let me show you like this. And then this is Schoolgirl. This one's probably my favorite. Oh, and this is gorgeous. Oh, I love this one. Okay, anyways, as I was saying, Dazai Osamu is the author of No Longer Human, which is quite controversial, I suppose, in the West. Some people find it resonant, others detest it. For me, I allow this book to influence a worrying amount of my personality in my teenage years to a point where I feel hurt when people say they don't like the book. So yeah, I'm not ready to talk about No Longer Human, but I like to introduce you to one of these short stories, which will hopefully shed some new light on your opinion of the author. You know, Dazai's writing can be cheerful, it can be depressing, and he can speak in the voice of a 14-year-old girl, and he can sound quite misogynistic, as some might say. What is common in Schoolgirl and Hazakura to Mateki is that he adopts a female perspective, but of different ages. He also does this in his novel The Setting Sun, and you know, he is just so great at depicting the sorrows of women of all ages. His prose doesn't come across as, you know, forced, patronizing or condescending, and I feel the sentiments of his female characters because his writing captures the delicate feelings and emotions that are particular to women and girls, and he writes with such tenderness that I tapped almost every other page and teared up when I reached the end. Yes, this short story also made me cry a little. I am just so sentimental. I think Dazai must have been a very sensitive person, and that's why he can write women and elicit such emotions from me. I rambled, but Schoolgirl is written in the form of a journal with the protagonist, a nameless schoolgirl, chronicling her feelings and thoughts on an ordinary day. She is very sensitive and introspective, and her sentimentality and the way she grapples with the feelings of, you know, existential angst are very relatable. You've got to read this book. And once again, if you can read Japanese, please read the story in Japanese, and I will link it because I think translation may strip away some nuances. The fifth book is Piranesi, and I would literally recommend this book to anyone. It's a mystery and a fantasy, and I just realized that I like both genres, so it's a solid 4-star for me. The story is presented as a series of journal entries and is narrated by the eponymous narrator, Piranesi. He lives in a vast and mysterious house, known as the House with a capital H. The house is an immense, labyrinthine structure with countless halls, vestibules, staircases, and passages, which all have a statue in or attached to them. It's a world of its own, different to ours. Every day, Piranesi explores the house and writes down his discoveries in his journal. He's very methodical and meticulous in cataloguing his findings, kind of like Monica from Friends. Piranesi is not entirely alone in the house. There's another person called The Other, and he visits the house occasionally and asks Piranesi to investigate certain halls of him. There are also skeletons lying around in the house, suggesting that people might have died here, and Piranesi takes it upon himself to, you know, look after them. As the narrative unfolds, Piranesi starts to question his own identity, the true nature of the other, and, you know, the significance of the skeletons that he cares for. I think the story is quite slow and confusing in the beginning. I think the author is just, you know, building up the world, and it picks up the pace after, you know, part 3. And it becomes so interesting and intriguing to see Piranesi discovering new clues that suggest a deeper mystery, and, you know, to see how he, you know, uncovers the truth of his identity and memory. And it really just flies by. The only thing I would complain about is how elusive the geography of the house is to me. I just found it so confusing to see descriptions like the 568th hall to the northeast. Like, where is it? And there's a lot of descriptions like this. So I think it would have been a lot better if there had been an accompanying map in this book. And then I read The Haunting of the Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I'm not gonna lie, this is a weird story and I didn't enjoy it as much as I expected because it's not scary. So I just gave it like a general 3 stars. The story begins with Dr. Montague, an anthropologist who rents the Hill House for an entire summer in an attempt to prove the existence of the, paranormal scientifically. And what better way to engage in the most scientific of all human endeavors than by having a sleepover party? So he invites 3 people as his assistants, Theodora, Eleanor, and Luke. As they explore the house, they start to see how eccentric and confusing its layout is and how it has like a place or room that seems to defy the laws of physics. And the more I read, the more I feel like the house is more of a character than a setting. It's brooding, it's malevolent, and it's snaring. And there's a line in the book that says, "Around them the house brooded, settling and stirring with a movement that was almost like a shudder." And later in the story, I don't know what's going on, but like one of the female characters, Evermore, gets so like mentally unstable to the point where I felt like she was the scary one. And because the title of the book is called The Haunting of Hill House, not Haunted Hill House, so I feel like Eleanor is the one that is actually haunting the house. So yeah, I just don't have a lot of thoughts beyond that. If you happen to like this book, please leave me a comment. I also bought We've Always Lived in the Castle because many people recommended that one, so I hope that one doesn't disappoint. Then I read Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Think of this book as an extended version of the second task of the Triwizard Tournament in Harry Potter. That's basically what this book is. The main character is Scarlet and she has a little sister, Donatella. They are invited to this Caraval event, which has a vibe that is like a carnival but with magic. All participants, or I should say contestants, are assigned with the same task, and the first one to complete it gets a prize. And this year, the task is to find Scarlet's sister because she is like hidden somewhere. So you see what I mean? And the setting of the story is pretty festive and very fitting for October, but the characters are just so flat and flimsy, especially the main character. I think her sister is actually far more interesting and a lot smarter than her. And I was told over and over and over how much she cares about her little sister, but her actions show otherwise. Overall, it's just a very forgettable story, and the only reason why I wrote it is just because I was waiting for A Curse for True Love by the same author. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. Finally, the last book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, A Curse for True Love. I've been waiting for this book for 2 months, and I actually listened to the audiobook of this when I was working. Guilty, and I couldn't stop giggling when I reached like the last few chapters. Look at me. But yeah, if you haven't read the first 2 books in the series, I'd highly recommend you do so. It got me so flustered and left me in a whirlwind of emotions. I mentioned them in a previous wrap-up, so I'll link it somewhere. I won't go too much into A Curse for True Love because I don't want to spoil anything, but I can assure you that it delivers exactly what you'd hope for. And the narrative this time switches between 3 perspectives: Evangeline, Jax, and Apollo, and I wish there had been more Jax and less Apollo, to be honest. And also a couple more chapters about the happily ever after. I just feel like the ending is a bit rushed, and because of this, my favorite book in the trilogy is still The Ballad of Never After, and I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, but I just don't know if I should like bump it down to 4 stars. And look what I found in Woolies. It's apple juice with a cute little archer. It reminds me of Jax. And the last book is Friends, Lovers, and The Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. I picked this book up because Matthew passed away on the 28th of October. Rest in peace. I listened to the audiobook because it's narrated by Matthew himself. For me, it's hard to separate Chandler Bing from Matthew Perry because Matthew is Chandler in a way. In his memoir, Matthew mentions that the writers of Friends incorporated aspects of the actors' lives and their personal stories so that the actors could, connect to the show and each other. But I suppose Chandler only represents the brighter side of Matthew. In the shadows, he was battling with his addiction to drugs and alcohol, which is what The Big Terrible Thing, the title, about. And he experienced numerous relapses and, he went into rehab a lot of times. You can see how much his weight fluctuated throughout the 10 seasons of Friends. I don't have much to say about his memoir other than that it was really difficult and painful to listen to. I'm just under the impression that once you're addicted, you're a lost person. I've been extremely cautious about drinking since I turned 18 because each time I met a new therapist or psychologist, they'd inquire about this matter. So I've become teetotal. Yeah, I've been rewatching Friends these days. I actually do it every year. And as Thanksgiving is approaching, I'd like to conclude this wrap up with this clip from Friends.
Shall I carve?
By all means.
All right. Okay, who wants light cheese and who wants dark cheese?
I don't even want to know about the dark cheese.
Does anybody want to split this with me?
Oh, I will.
You guys have to make a wish. Make a wish? Come on, you know, Thanksgiving. Oh, you got the bigger half. What'd you wish for?
The bigger half.
All right, I'd like to propose a toast. Little toast here. Ding, ding, ding. I know this isn't exactly the kind of Thanksgiving that all of you planned, but for me, this has been really great, you know? I think because it didn't involve divorce or projectile vomiting. Anyway, I was just thinking, I mean, if you'd gone to Vail, or if you guys had been with your family, or if you didn't have syphilis and stuff, we wouldn't be all together, you know? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm very thankful that all of your Thanksgivings sucked.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
And hey, here's to a lousy Christmas.
And a crappy New Year.
Here, 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 here.